This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Tuesday, March the 12th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and David Williams. You'll be speaking with David when you pick up the phone, give us a shout, get in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. Pretty solid start there, Paddy. All right, pretty classic old Avalon Peninsula weather here today. So we get a big dump of snow, and then we get a big dump of rain, and the slush, and the fog, and away you go. Some snow forecasts in central, western, some of the northeast coast. Interesting comments coming from the Minister of Transportation, John Abbott. Talk about preparation for this additional snow. Maybe 10 to 30 centimeters, 50 in the higher elevations. But he said something along these lines. He said Central West are better positioned to deal with this type of snow. And I don't think he means snow clearing. I think he means the motoring public. So he went on to say that folks in this neck of the woods are always demanding bare pavement right now, today, as opposed to the folks in Central and West who are maybe more understanding of the limitations regarding snow clearing and their ability to navigate the winter roads better mentally than, maybe even physically, than we are here on the Avalon Peninsula. Interesting take. Probably not wrong either. Last night with the Growlers, the Idaho Steelheads got a point, lost 5-4 in overtime. And good news for Zach Dean, a former 2021 first-round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights. He was then traded into St. Louis. He's been playing in the American Hockey League for Springfield. He got recalled yesterday. So good news for Zach. He was not in the lineup last night, but hopefully he gets a chance to make his NHL regular season debut soon for the Blues. All right, a sporting heroes welcome for Team Guju's members who arrived at St. John's International Airport last night, long haul from Regina. No uptake yesterday on the phones about it, but it's worth reiterating. The greatest player of all time, the greatest team of all time, is from the province. Truly amazing stuff. So 6 Briars later, 6 Briars in the last 8 years, including a three-peat executed in Regina this past weekend. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Quick turnaround. The celebrations will be short. 2 weeks from now, they'll be off to Switzerland to compete in the World Championships. A top 6 finish in the Worlds guarantees an Olympic qualifying berth. So a lot on the line. Okay, let's move off into getting what you paid for. Got a note from a parent of a Grenfell student, of course, Memorial's campus out in Corner Brook, talking about the need to get reimbursed for their Wi-Fi fee. So when the the Grenfell campus was attacked by a cyber attack back in December, it caused havoc. And consequently, the Wi-Fi was down. Now, the university did indeed set up Wi-Fi hotspots, but they were unreliable. People were getting booted off. So the students won a $100 reimbursement. Fair enough. If you're not getting what you're paying for, then it's hard to justify that $100 fee. So they're looking for a refund. And it goes on to say that printing's also an issue. Here we are at a university campus, and there's only one printer. There's only one computer that has access to a printer on the entirety of the campus. So getting what you paid for, Grenfell students, they want their $100 back. In this neck of the woods, once again, here at Memorial University proper in St. John's. So apparently when you enroll and you pay your tuition and your fees, one of the fees is $68 per semester to attend the Fieldhouse. So it's a pretty good price for a Fieldhouse membership, but there's no opportunity to opt out, apparently. So there are some other fees that if you don't take advantage of, then you can indeed find an opt-out option, but not for this Fieldhouse membership at $68 per semester. That's a pretty big fee when you include the entirety of the student population, and everyone has to pay it. No opt-out, if that's correct. That's probably an interesting one for the Students' Union to take on. As well, sticking with education. So we know there's a concern here in this province. We've got the education accord has been struck, and we're working towards modernizing and transforming education. Not 100% sure what that looks like as of yet. But then we talk about the teacher shortage and the stress that it causes, whether it be for permanent full-time, for substitute teachers, specialized teachers. Everyone's heard these stories many times, and it's a huge problem. I read a story today about teacher shortages across the country because we are not alone. In Quebec, at the beginning of the school year this year, they were short 8,500 teaching vacancies, 2,000 full-time vacancies. And here's one of the quotes regarding the importance of getting it right in the classroom. I don't think as a society that we recognize how important this job is, how vital it is to our economy, our sustainability, our prosperity, our social cohesion, and what it means for us as humans to educate kids well. Absolutely no doubt. So education is always at the top of mind for me. If you'd like to expand on that from any angle, we're happy to do it. Because some of the numbers, and I'm not sure why this isn't one of the biggest stories in the province and across the country, is the most recent report brought forward by the Programme for International Student Assessment, PISA. They're looking at the education and academic progress of 15-year-old students in countries right around the world, basically focusing in on the pandemic, but it's not just the pandemic. Here's what they found. Average international math scores fell by the equivalent of 15 points compared to 2018 scores, while reading scores fell 10 points. In this country, overall math scores declined 15 points between 2018 and 2022, according to PISA, which defines a drop of 20 points as losing out on a full year of learning. And that means Canada's math score dropped by an equivalent of 3/4 of a year of learning. But the trend is older than 2018. If you look back to 2003, the trend has been downwards in math, reading, and science scores ever since. But yet, for some reason, we don't get the kind of traction that this story deserves. When you talk about this province specifically, the province with the largest drop in math scores to 2018 was Newfoundland and Labrador, with a 29-point drop. That's about a year and a half worth of math learning loss. Extraordinary. And how you overcome that particular concern is beyond my scope of understanding, but I don't know how that hasn't rose to the very top of the headlines generated by all media outlets and for listeners, because if you get it right in school, you get an awful lot of other things right as a result of a quality education. So it's not just the math scores. Reading scores are down. Science scores are down. In some provinces in the country, if you focus in on the pandemic, they've actually struck formal committees to examine what learning loss looks like, adjusting curriculum to reflect the learning loss. And it's not just preparation to move from grade 6 to grade 7 or 9 to 10 or 12 to post-secondary. It was through the entirety of the education system. So the scoring trend in some of the key areas of academics are down in the country and in desperate condition here in this province. So that's something I think we should be talking about a little bit more. And you know me, that whole chronic absenteeism story haunts me, knowing the fact that some 10% of the students from K to 12 are chronically absent from school, meaning they miss at least 1 month. You add in the personal development days and snow days, and that's another problem that doesn't seem to have gotten a whole lot of attention from the provincial government, knowing that it's not just the Department of Education that needs to focus in on that. There's a variety of departments that should be playing an active role. The one stat that should be a concern to all of us, if you're chronically absent in grade 6, 75% of those students will not graduate from high school. So says the data. Anyway, let's take it on. All right, Tony Wakeham bringing forward another concern and another strange story regarding our relationship with the travel nurses. All right. So we all know that some of the stories that have been told about paying for cab rides and Walmart furniture and an air fryer and meals, and that meal money has not even been paid to the travel nurses by Canadian Health Labs. This one's something else. I don't know if it's accurate, but it wasn't denied by the government yesterday when the question was posed. So apparently, there was a travel nurse's family flown into the province for Christmas and provided with a rental vehicle. The comptroller has been called in. You wonder what kind of public disclosure will be brought forward by the comptroller after that review and whether or not that will trigger the Auditor General to have a look. But here's the quote coming from the government. If contracts were put in place and were not followed, or if there was inappropriate spending at the health authority, if that was in fact the case, officials will be called in. How are we actually going to know about what the contract looks like, whether or not there was late add-ons, whether or not the rules were followed, if we don't get a look at the contract? I guess that begs the question of whether or not the Comptroller General is going to have the look and report not just directly back to Cabinet, where it can indeed be shielded from us, but whether or not we're going to get a public, unredacted view of what the Comptroller General found. Because the money is extraordinary. People will focus in on the 5 months last year where there was some $36 million spent on travel nurses. Add to it, and the question we asked of Minister Osborne last week on this program, is what we saw in Corner Brook. 6 travel nurses were pulled off of the unit, and we know that contract has expired as of February 28th and will not be renewed. But I don't think anybody really firmly understands exactly what the process is that's been put in place to make sure that when a travel nurse is not part of the fold, that it's not chaos and nurses show up to work thinking they've got a 12-hour shift. Lo and behold, it's a 21-hour shift, which doesn't work for anybody, including the nurse and absolutely including the patients. So that's a big one. In addition, so some people bemoan the fact that the province has chosen to make their way abroad to recruit healthcare professionals, whether it be in Ireland or in India or in Dubai. So now NL Health Services is going out to the market looking for 170 housing units. We don't know if they're going to lease or to rent, but they're looking for 170 to accommodate the recruited healthcare professionals moving to the province. We know in Dubai that the province made 68 job offers. We don't know exactly how many of those have been accepted. So, it's the double whammy, isn't it? We all, I think, to a man, to a woman, want to see the healthcare shortages addressed. We want the gaps to be filled. And if those gaps are solved by bringing people in from abroad, then it comes with a housing concern. Of course it does. The government doesn't own housing. Well, it owns some, in the Newfoundland Labrador Housing Corporation. But to accommodate this, what does it mean for the already pressurized rental market? So inside that 170, 50 units in the eastern urban zones, 30 units in the eastern rural zone, 40 units in the central zone, 30 units in the western zone, and 20 units in Labrador. So, of course, we've got to accommodate and to house people who come to the province as healthcare professionals that were recruited actively by the provincial government. So they've got some legitimate concerns here. Yvette Coffey, for one, the president of the Registered Nurses Union. Are these all for recruited healthcare professionals that will be added to the permanent roster and are not, for instance, travel nurses? That's an important question. And there's lots of caveats out there from the government in their tender about what exactly these units have to look like, and very favourable. So the units have to be within 15-minute drive of a health authority facility and near public transportation to amenities like grocery stores, restaurants, and other services. They also want the units to be in a quiet and safe neighbourhood. They must come furnished, including bed sheets, kitchen appliances, and furniture that are new or in like new condition. So when you talk about public transportation to amenities like grocery stores, other services, restaurants, that's only available in one or two of the zones that they're talking about the numbers of units that are required. So again, yes, healthcare professionals needed, welcomed, but it does come with an additional pressure on the housing issue, the housing market. Add to the housing market, we had the Mayor of Bay Roberts, Walter Yetman, on the programme. I guess it was last week. And this is something that I had never really considered until we spoke with the Mayor and saw some of the public reaction out in Bay Roberts when a developer came forward and said they were willing to build 20 affordable units. When the council heard the proposal, delighted. When the information became public, the general public, not quite as positive here. So they're talking about what affordable housing means when you just think about it in your own head. So for some, it's just simply that, the first word, affordable. It's not necessarily meaning the undesirables are coming to your neighbourhood. What happens if and when you've got a couple in their 70s that are trying to downsize, look for something more manageable because they're on a fixed income? They're not going to be a detriment to the community, but just amazingly so. And I guess the concept of not in my backyard, and this is not just about Bay Roberts, this is an issue regarding all sorts of development and proposals. So affordable does not mean that you're going to get simply folks who are less, was the quote used in the story, less palpable social traits. It doesn't have to mean that at all, right? People interact or they overlap affordable with low income and, welfare housing, however people think about it. But here we are in an affordable housing struggle, and now all of a sudden it's got an attached stigma, which is not going to help us make our way forward. But anyhow, sticking inside the walls of a home or a housing unit or a rental. This is a pretty interesting announcement coming from Airbnb. We know how popular that platform is. Their revenue is up. They're in really strong shape. So as of the end of next month, they are banning the use of indoor security cameras in listings on its site around the world. So it's prohibited to have a hidden camera, one of the nanny cams. So if you make it known on your listing that you do indeed have security cameras in place, in the common areas, not in the bathroom and in the bedrooms, but in the common areas. But Airbnb has sided with the privacy versus security, You know that the owners of Airbnb, some of them would like to keep their eyes on what's happening in their unit, right? It's their investment. They'd like to know if and when there's a cause to go after a renter because they beat the place up. Go to the tape. But now they're saying that they will not be allowed. Even if you have reported it on your listing, on their platform, that's going away. That's going by the wayside, which makes a lot of sense because, it doesn't just mean that you would be involved in the bedroom and or the possibility for the cameras to not only be seeing the visuals but listening in on private conversations. And you could be wearing your birthday suit to go get a drink of water in the common area. So makes sense to me that Airbnb is making that particular move to ban the use of indoor security cameras on all of their listings. All right, how are we doing on the telephone there, Dave? All right, let's keep going. What does this scribble say? Oh, the question of the day on VOCM.com, and comments coming from the minister responsible about a potential to secure a co-funding deal of some variety with the federal government to build a replacement for Her Majesty's Penitentiary. We do indeed house federal inmates at the pen at this moment in time. The fee is minimal, or the additional cost for the federal government is minimal, but certainly would be welcome if there's federal monies coming in, because as we've seen in the past, when the government went out to tender the last time, the bids, and the second time around there's only one sole bidder, the bids exceeded government's affordability envelope, which we think was somewhere around $350 million. Ballooning construction costs are impacting all of these types of moves, and of course being built in a P3 fashion, which I think we can extend that P3 conversation to wherever you think is appropriate. The replacement for St. Clair's, the Corner Brook Hospital, long-term care facilities, and yes, the penitentiary, and yes, the divided highway, which just popped into my mind, which is not being welcomed by the folks at NAPE, to say the very least. All right, let's go to the great outdoors. So we know the fish harvesters have been at Confederation Building and quite vocal. I think they're planning to be there again today. I think they're talking about being at the Petton Building tomorrow. And their concept is clear. You know, giving what can be labeled as a fractured relationship between the FFAW and some of their harvesters, and the harvesters and the union and the Association for Seafood Producers, the harvesters are talking about, in capital letters on the Fishermen's Forum on Facebook, free enterprise. They feel like they're completely hamstrung by the price-setting process. And, of course, the only place to sell your product, unless you're willing to steam across the Gulf, is to sell it to one of the producers here, processors here in the province, as opposed to, like many other industries on the face of the earth, the concept of an outside buyer, with the potential, possibly, to get a higher price that would be settled by whatever this new price-setting process will be. So, harvesters, if you have any of those concerns you'd like to talk about live on the air, let's do it. Also had a call yesterday about trapping. Trappers in Labrador are bringing forward legitimate concerns about the dwindling moose population and the increasing wolf population. They talk about packs of wolves all over Labrador. And of course, wolves are majestic animals, and we've seen what the relationship between the wolves and the caribou population. You know, you went from hundreds of thousands of animals to mere thousands, and of course, the number one predator for the caribou would be the wolf. So what they're talking about is not only that problem, having a better understanding of exactly what's going on and the impact on the moose population. They're saying if you want us as trappers to go harvest more of these wolves, you're going to have to pay. Currently, at this moment in time, if you harvest a wolf, you have to submit, it's mandatory to submit the wolf skull to the province after they're caught and processed. They're paid $25 per wolf carcass and an additional $35 from the Newfoundland Labrador Outfitters Association. They say that that's pennies when compared to the amount of work it takes. In 2018, the Northwest Territories and Nunavut announced the Wolf Harvest Incentive Area. And I won't get into the area itself, but in that area, a wolf carcass will get a trapper $1,200. If a trapper prepares the pelt traditionally, $400 is added on. And if the pelt meets prime first standards, an additional $350 is given to the trapper. The incentives can total $1,950 for one animal. So obviously nowhere near what's going on here, but it's an interesting conversation because whether it be folks who are out trying to snare rabbits and the type of trapping or snares that are allowed and the success rate with keeping the rabbit has been a fun conversation to be engaged in. But if you want to talk about that, you know what to do. A couple of very quick ones. So there's lots of counterfeit money out there circulating, apparently, and there's reports coming from Harbour Grace RCMP talk about in Carbonear, businesses that have fake $100 bills. There's lots of businesses that won't accept a $100 bill, period, because of the risk associated with potential counterfeit, but these counterfeit bills are laughable. They are absolutely terrible. So some of the bills have words like film production and not legal tender printed right on them. In fact, the bills spelling Canada misspelled the name of the country. They don't have the final A. So the bills say Canada, not Canada. So they're out there, but it should be easy enough if you're doing your due diligence to identify a bill that is as bogus looking as these counterfeits that are out there. All right. It was 15 years ago today that Cougar Flight 491 and the Sikorsky S-92 ditched into the Atlantic. Horrific story. I was on Out of the Fog at the time. We never used to go to news conferences and what have you. It just wasn't the style of the show. But that day I did attend the one at the Comfort Inn. And to see the face of the family members who are arriving, and of course it would be bleak to say the very least when a helicopter ditches in the ocean. 17 on board were killed. One sole survivor, who I know, fine fella, I'll leave his name out of it because I'm sure today is an awful day for him and the friends and the family of the 17 who were lost. So 15 years ago today, on March the 12th of 2009, Cougar Flight 491 ditched after they reported zero pressure in the main gearbox. And of course, that story emanated around the world for concerns regarding that particular gearbox and the run dry time. So anyway, 15 years ago today. And our condolences to the members of the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary and the friends and family of an officer who died suddenly in Labrador City a couple of days ago. They say it's not a suspicious death, but no further information has been offered by the RNC. You know, you wonder what kind of supports are in place ongoing for members of the force and the general public when we talk about anguish and mental health and mental illness. And one such story and one such support was, of course, Stella and Constable Krista Fagan. And they did great work in the community, and I would suggest great work inside the rank and file of the RNC, and for some unknown reason, that support has gone by the wayside. And I'm not trying to take advantage of a tragedy to put that back in, but it's just the ongoing conversation regarding supports in place. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're going to kick it off talking about Labrador Trappers. That's great. I'm glad Jim's in the queue there. And then the Vice Chair of Happy City St. John's is David Brake. The Ward 4 by-election is today here in the city to fill Ian Froud's seat in Ward 4. They had a town hall. We'll hear from David Brake on that one. And Chris wants to talk about the fact the city's doing nothing about flooding on a city street. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin on line number 3. We talked about the Labrador trapper concern regarding wolves and the moose population right off the top of the show. Jim Schaus is a trapper who's calling from Happy Valley Goose Bay this morning on 3. Jim, you're on the air.
Yeah, okay, good. Sort of caught me off guard there, boys. But anyway, yeah. With regarding, well, not so much wolves, but about the caribou and the moose situation up here. Of course, you know, we lost our caribou harvest in, well, way back 2013 or something, due to a lot of factors, and we're not going to get into those. But now it seems like the moose are in short supply. And, you know, some of that can be from an overharvest, maybe too many licenses. I'm not really sure. But with regard to recruitment of moose, you know, one animal out there that's constantly killing the moose 12 months of the year is the wolf. No, I got no, you know, nothing wrong with the wolf. You know, having a, you know, he's got to eat too. But you know, we've got to try to keep our moose hunt because you know, we don't have a caribou hunt anymore. And this is not new to Labrador. This has been going on, you know, across Western Canada and the territories, and even in the Western U.S., where they have, you know, a lot of predation from wolves killing the caribou herds out there, and then, you know, down in the States, they're at the cattle, or they're at the elk, or they're at the you know, all the deer. So those different provinces and states have an incentive program for trappers and hunters. If they turn in their carcass, they will get a you know, a pretty substantial dividend, I guess you call it. It's not a bonus. Well, I guess it could be a bonus, but let's just say a dividend, and that's an incentive for people to try to harvest wolves, because you know, when you're trying to catch a wolf, it's not like trying to catch a little pine marten. You know, it takes special dedication and special traps, and sometimes a lot of snowmobile time, and right now the Newfoundland government, I might as well tell everybody that they are offering I think I don't know $30 or something like that incentive for if you turn in a carcass, but that's peanuts compared to what the other places that I just mentioned are willing to contribute. So I think our government, in cooperation maybe with the federal government, should step up to the plate here, and let's try to eliminate some of the wolves. I mean, I don't want to see an aerial hunt. I don't want to see anything like that. But if they're caught within season, I think trappers should be compensated for it.
Well, at this point, so it's $25 per wolf carcass. It's mandatory to submit the wolf skull to the Canid Carcass Collection Program. Another $35 coming from the Newfoundland Labrador Outfitters Association for a $60 total. You mentioned the territories and none of it. Between all the different incentive pots of money, it can add up to $1,950 per animal. So obviously they have a much different stance on this. This is a question based on ignorance, Jim. So I have gone out to try and snare rabbits or what have you. How do you actually try to catch a wolf? What's the process? Because you talked about the time and effort and specialized approach and a lot of time on the snowmobile. How does it work?
Well, boy, I tell you, there's huge difference from snaring a rabbit and snaring a wolf.
Of course.
A wolf is just so damn smart. I mean, it takes special preparations of your gear. It takes expensive gear if you're going to use leg hole traps. And by the way, they are legal for wolves if they're if they're padded jaw or if they're an offset jaw, but they're just expensive, and they got to be prepared so that the wolf can't smell them and things like that. So it's a lot to it, and a lot of people try and just get frustrated and give up. But I think most of the wolves in Labrador, actually, to tell you the truth, are harvested from snow machine when they're maybe caught out on the sea ice or something like that, and shot then with a high-powered rifle.
Do we happen to know, for context over the last few years, what the moose population looks like? Because we do all know the stories regarding, say, for instance, the George River caribou herd. There was at one point at peaks of 800,000 animals. You'd see them on the hills. It looked like the hills were moving, and now down to a few thousand. So do we have numbers regarding the moose population and or the wolf population?
Well, I think we have sort of estimates of the moose population. They do surveys occasionally. I don't think they spend near as much chopper time in Labrador as they do on the island, but I'm sure the wildlife might be able to give you some sort of an estimate of the figures. That's not something I would have. But what I do have is the fact that I talk to all the trappers all over Labrador, from Nain to southern Labrador and Lab West, and they tell me about, they're seeing the moose numbers just drop in their area. And, last few years, people have not been able to fill their tags.
So when you talk about there needs to be a sustainability plan, can you elaborate what you mean exactly by that? Well, I'd like to see the moose numbers rising as opposed to falling. Well, of course. It's a complicated issue, so trying to strike that required eco balance, generally has been left up to nature itself. But of course, if you get an out of whack balance when there's so many wolves compared to a dwindling moose population, we cannot see a repeat of the history regarding the caribou population. So I think you're absolutely on the right track. Whether or not the government is going to enhance incentives inside their carcass program remains to be seen. But I can only imagine at $60 it's less than attractive to go get a wolf, unless it's something that you're personally intimately involved in and enjoy doing or something.
Yes, and like you said earlier, then you have to turn in the skull. Well, personally, I don't like turning in the skull because some people like to keep the skull and bleach them out, and then they can sell them themselves or use them for ornaments or give them away to people for in their cabins. A bleached white skull is, to me, looks pretty attractive. Some more people might find it, not so, but... that's one of the things. Why should you have to turn in that skull? If it's a tooth they need, well, okay, pull out that small tooth and they can get the tooth analyzed, but why turn in the skull? And another thing about the black bears are also killing the moose. Now, a good thing that they've done, I got to give them a pat on the back here, is they're allowing hunters and trappers in Labrador now to, if they want to harvest more than 2 bears, you can harvest more than 2 bears, but you have to buy additional licenses, which is a pretty darn good move. And I'll pat them on the back for that, because there's a number of us fellas up here that like harvesting bears, and we like eating the meat. And apparently the black bear, if they're handled correctly, their skin sells really well at the auction.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. This is kind of outside what we've been talking about. How many polar bear licenses are given, Jim?
Polar bear licenses. There's probably about a dozen.
Okay.
But that's all for the Inuit communities on the north coast.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, and the polar bear are in very good shape. There's lots of polar bears, but the problem there is that the market has gone soft on the polar bears now because of the fact that it's hard to move the polar bears from one country to another because they're in a class. I don't know what the class is. I don't know if it's endangered or sort of semi-endangered or something, but it makes it very hard to move them from country to country. So buyers get frustrated when they buy them at auction, trying to might take them years to get them back to their hometown.
Jim, it's good to have you on the show this morning. I appreciate your time.
Well, no sweat. Anytime. Thanks.
All the best. Bye-bye. That's Jim Schaus. He's a trapper up in Labrador. I believe he lives in Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Let's take a break. Chris, appreciate your patience. He wants to talk about what the city's doing or not doing to prevent flooding on Duffett's Road. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Chris. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm just calling in. We have some issues over on Duffett's Road, but before I get to that, I'd just like to thank the city crew for the job that they're doing. Well, we had a lot of snow, and guys done an excellent job, so keep up the good work. But unfortunately, we have a farm over on Duffett's Road. The road in the last 3 years has been flooding more and more. So we are working with the city to try to rectify it. But at the moment, I cannot get any feedback or results from the city today. And naturally, the road is the worst that has ever been. And to top it off, I got a sick horse, and now I don't know if I can get the vet in to get to the horse. So right now, I'm all over on the side of the road to go over and check to see if I can bring a backhoe over to try to clear some of this water away because it was a complete flood out. Our barn's flooded. Basically, I'm trying to get the attention of someone down to the city. Can someone come over? Can someone help?
So, Chris, you say the flooding and the frequency of flooding is getting worse. Do you know why?
Yes and no, because at the moment, I'm not an engineer now either, Paddy, by no means, but I am in the excavation scene. So basically, there's been a lot of ground cleared around us for local development and stuff. I'm just guessing, the trees and the shrubs and the grass would have naturally, soaked that water up. So I'm guessing, that's maybe where some of this water could be coming from. But I also said, we're working with the city on it too, to, rectify the problem or try to. But like I said, today I can't get anyone to come over. I can't get a hold of anyone for some strange reason, I guess, because of all the water. So I was hoping, that I could catch someone's ear on Openline and, they could really help us out or reach out to us.
Let's hope so, because, things like the required infrastructure to deal with flooding, whether it be storm drains, what have you, and then you're onto something there when you talk about the way water moves when we clear so much land for development, whether it be residential or commercial. It does have a direct impact. I mean, I'm looking right out my window here at Kenmount Terrace, and the amount of vegetation and trees that were cleared to accommodate that subdivision has a direct impact down the hill with the way the water used to be managed, and the bogs and the wetlands that help us from being flooded out all the time. There's a cost associated with development, and that's one of them.
Yes, and that's, like I said, that's why we're trying to rectify stuff. But see, the problem for me really is that I've been in talks with my councillor, and I've been talking with Mayor Breen, and I'm trying to get a hold of Mayor Breen actually this morning. Where there's so much flooding right now at the moment, the understanding that I had, that city would send some city staff over, and they would basically, try to get some measurements, try to get some thought of why this is happening, what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I said, I know this is only early, but it's somewhat of an emergency. It's like I said, we got 4 horses over there. Our barn's flooded. It's probably 4 to 5 inches of water in it. The driveway's flooded out. The road is flooded. Like I said, I'm on the way over to myself now to see if I can do something with my truck with a blade on it, or if I'm going to have to bring a backhoe over, And there's nothing that's really like the city operators can do, because, they can control the water.
Well, nobody can control the water. Water is going to go exactly where it wants to go. And unless we know exactly why things are worsening, then you can't put any solutions or ways to resolve the frequency of floods. So keep us in the loop, Chris. Let us know if someone from the city comes up to try to give you a hand here in the immediate term, and then maybe to evaluate how and why you're seeing the flooding you're seeing, if there's any infrastructure improvements that can be put in place to ease that pressure.
Yes, Eddie, I most definitely will, and I appreciate you taking time to let me use your show to get some help, I guess. But if anyone's listening from the city, we are kind of somewhat in a bit of a state of emergency over on Duffel Road. So, Mayor Breen, if you could give me a shout, or I know you're probably busy, and we know that there's a lot going on, but at the moment, it's a bit of a big deal over there.
I appreciate the time. Keep us in the loop.
We'll follow up.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 2, speaking to the Vice Chair of Happy City St. John's. That's David Brake. Dr. David Brake, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Lovely to be here.
Happy to have you on the program. So you had your town hall. Give us the Coles Notes summary, what the questions were, what you heard.
Well, I must say we went into this project thinking that it was just important to give people more of a chance to hear what the candidates thought about the big issues. That part was really successful. You can see the results on our Facebook page. You can go and visit and watch the whole thing, and also read the answers to written questions at happycd.ca. But it was a real surprise, and a welcome one, actually, to see how well it went off, especially given how nasty things have got politically of late. I was hopeful, but I was a little apprehensive that there'd be a lot of yelling back and forth and entrenched positions, and everyone just like waffling away. But if you watch it or listen to it, these were 4 people who seemed genuinely committed to listening to one another and learning from one another. Maybe it's a difference between local and provincial or national politics, because of course there's no parties involved. But it's really refreshing, and even more encouraging. We when we invited them to this round table and brought in for the first time an academic, Elizabeth Schwartz, who directs a new hub for the study of local governance. After we turned the cameras off, I invited them to stay, and they talked to our expert academic, and they talked to one another, and I think they really learned from one another. I think that this kind of informal event has a lot to teach citizens about politicians who actually seem to care about the issues, and might be a good way for politicians and academics and activists perhaps to learn from one another rather than kind of tossing rocks at one another.
Well, thankfully, municipal politics has proven to be a bit more collegial than provincial or federal politics, because then you bring in the concept of the parties, the political parties themselves, which does require a bit more staunch positioning on the issues and towing the party line and being in line with the comments coming from fellow candidates around the country. Debates become really quite heated. Sometimes we pretend the political ideology is so different that they do everything they can to try to set themselves apart, versus municipally, the issues are the issues. right? There's not a whole lot of divide there. There can be the refunneling and refocusing on money. Some candidates will be thrifty. Some will be much more talking about expansion of services. But the issues don't change. And so consequently, municipal politicians are generally a little bit more level-headed than we see on the other two fronts aforementioned. So give us a couple of quick ideas about some of the main subjects that were broached, and maybe a couple of tidbits, even if you don't want to associate a comment coming from one candidate or another. Sure. So what was, number one, what was the first issue that was put to the floor?
Well, the biggest one was probably housing, not least because there was one of the candidates they're all to a greater or lesser extent involved with housing and housing and the regulations around it are definitely in the news. But that's one of the areas where the city itself can have most impact, right? Like what gets built when, where, and how is a crucial part of the city. And to my slight surprise, everyone seemed, by the end anyhow, to be coming around to there being a need for more density in the housing in and around St. John's. Everyone certainly seemed committed to there being more housing being needed, for sure.
Yeah, everyone knows more is required. The trick is how you get to more quicker than has been traditionally the case, municipally speaking, right across the country. And as someone who has been involved a couple of times in this front, it just takes too long. And before long, if you had a business model in mind and on paper, and then you look at some of the carry costs regarding the timeliness with permits and inspections and some of the redundancies that are in place, there's a reason why people just say it's not really worth it. I mean, the cost to build per square foot and the already massive pressure on the rental system, it required things like the Housing Accelerator Fund. It required some of the caveats associated with provincial money to build homes in St. John's in particular, or Mount Pearl, because it's one thing to say we need them, quite another to give me a roadmap on how we get there.
Yeah, it definitely, the delays did come up. And I think we didn't talk very much about it, but I think it's pretty clear while publicly built houses and in funding from the federal government and so on, this is all very important. Most of the heavy lifting on in terms of housing is probably going to be with the private sector. And so the question of how to get the private sector to build housing that we need in the right way definitely was an issue. Interestingly, came up through Dr. Swartz. One of the reasons perhaps why there are delays in getting approval, not the only one, but the reason why some of this takes a while is the kinds of economies that people call for as councillors. That mean maybe there's not enough staff available to process all of these claims and to deal with developers. I mean, if you do need people on the city's end to support the economies on one side may end up costing in the long run the ability to work through housing applications in a timely way.
Well, some of the provincial monies have been set aside that the homes will be built by the private sector, but the rents will be set based on the table at Newfoundland Labrador Housing Corp. So, it's one thing to build it, again, quite another for it to be inside the affordability envelope, which is a moving target depending on who you are, where you are. But, yeah, build it is one thing. And, of course, then those who are in that industry, period, will say not only is the timing for permitting and inspections a problem, it's getting people to actually have the skilled trades background to be able to build a home. I mean, it's a multi-pronged concern here, and there's not one really simple silver bullet available. Dr. Brake, would you like to add anything else here this morning?
Only that I wish that we'd been able to get more into in the discussion, and I think it's something that people need to be thinking about. The potential changes to the City of St. John's Act, which governs what the city will be allowed to do in future. There have been changes, as you know, to the Municipalities Act governing the towns, but City of St. John's and Mount Pearl and Corner Brook are next on the list. It's been a long time waiting, but it's not too soon to be starting for candidates in the upcoming municipal elections to start thinking about and talking about what they'd like to see the city able to do when it comes time to that. Lastly, I'd just like to add, as you mentioned up front, it is voting day today for Ward 4. So people who want to hand in their ballots between 8 and 8 p.m. Need to go with ID to either Kenmount Terrace Community Centre on 85 Messenger Drive or to the Holiday Inn St. John's on 180 Portugal Cove Road. Please vote. If you aren't quite sure where you want to go, we've got all the information on the candidates at our website, happycity.ca, and links through to other media interviews.
Yeah, and there's a story on our website at vocm.com and a link to go to the voter registration portal with the info required. Good to have you on the show, David. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for giving me an option.
My pleasure. Take care and stay in touch. Okay, bye-bye. David Brake, the Vice Chair of Happy City St. John's. Let's take a break. When we come back, John Effort's in the queue. He's a fish harvester. He's one of the gentlemen leading the charge, looking for some changes, meaningful changes, about the inshore fishery here. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go. Line number 1. Juanita, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to call to give you a heartfelt thank you to you and your team for all the good work that you guys do. A loved one of mine, very close loved one, was in a bit of a turmoil, and you were able to help them out. And I don't think you guys are thanked enough or shown enough appreciation for all that you do.
Well, I appreciate that. And of course, many times I'm just the middleman. We'll put it out there, and sometimes we do indeed actively try to pursue assistance, help, or try to settle an issue for people. But then, of course, it's the kind hearts of people listening to the program that also play a major role in some of this stuff taking place or getting done. But I appreciate that this morning, Juanita.
Oh, well, I thought it had to be said, and I've been wanting to say it. I work a lot. I'm not off very many mornings, so this is one morning I was off, and I said, it's a good time to take the opportunity to call you. And that goes out to your listeners as well. Like you said, they're all part of the team as well, and it's a very big, heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you for all that you do. Thank you very much for making time for the program this morning. You're always welcome. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye, Juanita. There you go. That's nice. Let's go to line number 4. Mary, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, Mary.
Yes, this is Mary Comerford.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a flood here on Labor Day weekend, and I lost my dining room and front room. So we had flood again last night, and it's gone right. They came down and they done every culvert down this way. Only me, and I'm a 72-year-old, and I have a home care worker, and she said it's gone altogether, right? And if it's nothing done, the house is going to be lost. And I don't want to leave my home. What needs to be done, Mary? What exactly are we talking about? They came down and I talked for them before, they done every culvert down from my place, because my place had the first culvert. There's no water going out through the culvert. The culvert needs to be changed to a bigger culvert. And soon, nobody down below will able to get up. There's 3 school youngsters just on the back of me, and the road is gone. And I need something done, because my son had to come from home last time, and it was halfway up my ramp. I didn't even know that. And take him and his son out of the house. And they said they were going to fix it, but they came down, they done every other road to put the sign down for working on the road, and it was free for the culvert was through. There's no water going out. There's too much rocks or something in it. It needs a bigger culvert there for more security for me. The issue with the culverts and the size of the culvert is a big concern everywhere. We found out the hard way a couple of times when some of the major storms came that the culverts weren't up to the task of rerouting the water. But they put the sign right by where my culverts to the last time, and done all the culverts down from me, but they never done mine. Never took mine up and put a new culvert there. And the water's not going to add to the culvert because there's too much stuff in it.
Yeah, so the culvert might not be big enough, but of course, if we're not going to keep the culverts clear, then even if you put in a big one, if all of a sudden it continues to be filled up with rocks and old grout and debris...
That's what's in it. Everything is in it. That's where we had this flood there Labor Day weekend. I phoned about it then, and they said they'd have a fix, but there's no fixing. They never came and fixed it.
Yeah, well, that's a good place to start, isn't it? As opposed to the need potentially to dig it up and put a bigger one back in there, just to clear it out from whatever's already in it because of the last bit of flooding.
It would cut off the flooding, yes, it would.
Well,
bigger culvert though.
And I know what part of Riverhead you live in, so...
Riverhead.
Pardon me?
Riverhead.
I said Riverhead, yeah.
Yeah, you know me. I knew your Uncle Leo, Leonard.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I do know you, and I know what part of the community you live in, so maybe we'll get some direction from the mayor as to conversations had with the Department of Transportation as to whether or not there's going to be some work done, or whether or not the municipality itself can do some of that culvert cleaning to spare you your front room and dining room flooding. So I can do that much for you, Mary.
But the last time they had to put a new dining room and front room there. I couldn't even go in there. Like, I was in my bedroom. I had my bedroom, my bathroom, and my kitchen. That's as far as I could go. Everything else was out in the kitchen.
Let me see what I can find out. I'll do that for you this morning.
Okay, Paddy.
Appreciate your time, Mary. Good luck.
Okay.
All right, you're welcome. Bye-bye. Let's go ahead and take a break. John Efford is a fish harvester. He's in the queue. We appreciate his patience. So, John, right after this, and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, John Efford. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
Best kind, sir. How about you?
I'm doing good. Paddy, I'm going to apologize right off the bat. I'm going to have to keep this short, but just wanted to reach out and give you an idea of what we're doing here this morning. We're getting mixed signals from the government, and different groups are putting out different signals about what we're doing here. That we're here about price, and we're here about setting a formula to negotiate a minimum price. We are not here for that purpose. In saying that, price and a proper formula for setting a minimum price is important. But the reason that we're here is for our freedom. We need free enterprise. We're hogtied now by a provincial government's legislation that is limiting the amount of processors that's in Newfoundland. We cannot ship our product off the island by legislation that's in the provincial legislature and policy. Look, all we're looking for is free enterprise. We have a group of companies here now who have bought up and closed down all of their competition. They form together as one. There's a cartel. You can call it what you like. It's collusion. It's a cartel. Our hands are tied. We're stuck, and the only answer to our problem right now is free enterprise. And how do we get that? Very simple. The government has to lift the policies, change the policy, and allow outside buyers in and lift the caps on the smaller processors that are here now. And no caps. We're not looking for, we don't want any caps on any processors here in Newfoundland. And we need more processing licenses available to anybody in Newfoundland who wants to start processing.
Yeah, the cap was a problem last year in the snow crab. If you look at the newly reinstated crab plant out in St. Mary's, so they were able to get some additional crab to process given the overcapacity at other plants. But fair enough. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the concept of being able to sell out of province, once you land it, you can't ship it out. But if you catch it at sea and steam across, you can sell it elsewhere, right?
That's 100% correct, which really makes no sense. So we are allowed as Newfoundlanders to sell our product wherever we like, but we cannot bring it back to Newfoundland and sell it off the island. It makes no sense. I went aboard my boat. My crew was staying aboard my boat while this was going on. I went down last night and we had supper. And I looked at a chart. For me to land back here in the province, the furthest distance that I'll have to go is probably 120 mile return trip. For me to leave here, leave the fishing ground and steam to Nova Scotia with it, it's 460 miles, 470 miles. That's a one-way trip, and logistically and cost effectively, it doesn't make sense. It's just a silly rule that has to be changed.
John, when you talk about more processing licenses, because I hear that all the time, there's so many big companies control so much of the sector. So even if we had more processing licenses, how would that have an impact on the price? Because the price would be hopefully set based on what the market can bear as opposed to increased profitability for the harvester and or the processor. So what does more processing licenses mean positively or pragmatically?
Well, look, the more processing license here now, in combination with the outside buyers, is going to put competition back in the system. So when you got competition, you got a bargaining point. Without competition, you can't bargain because you're told what to do. It's as simple as that. We need free enterprise.
Does that mean, would that also include the ability for someone, say, a buyer from Asia, the European Union, the United States, South America, to have those buyers on the wharf competing with the local processors? Is that part of the concept of free enterprise in your mind? That's out of my realm of understanding now when you're talking about Canadian trade in and outside of Canada. But right now we're just looking to open up and have the same system as every other province in Canada to do interprovincial sales. Now, if that's a possibility to ship our product directly to, I don't know. I couldn't answer that question. What we're looking for now is interprovincial sales. Fair enough, because the way it currently works, I think everyone knows, it simply is not working. I mean, even the price-setting panel last year, when they set the price on snow crab, they said out loud, this is probably not the right price. But when we have such a rigid process that the union puts in a price, the ASP puts in a price, and it's pick one or the other, it doesn't really leave for a whole lot of compromise or negotiations.
Exactly, and again, this is not about the price. Price is very important. A proper formula to set a minimum price is very important. But again, the competition will help and will help fix that problem. Is what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
Understood. So where are you today? What's the plan for today? I think you're at the Confederation Building again.
Yeah, we're at Confederation Building today. We started this Monday before last with a small group from my crab fleet, and it's just built momentum. And I mean, it's every fleet, it's every fish harvester. And again, we're talking about, it's not about price. It's not about the formula. It's also not about one individual group, and it's not about one individual fishery. This is about all fish harvesters catching and every species of fish in Newfoundland. I mean, it got to the point over the last few years with scheduling, when someone is telling you when you can leave, when you can come in, how much you can bring in, and then it even got to the point what fisheries you could do. I mean, the capacity here now cannot handle what we can bring in. Is it because of the markets? No, it's because a few companies decided to get together and collude together and control the processing and the fish harvesters.
Because we know the dock price, I believe, has been set in Nova Scotia at $2.50 a pound. I don't know what that means for harvesters here, whether or not that's an adequate or reasonable number. But, the issue happens every single year on every single species. It's so late in the day before we learn what the total allowable catch is, before we learn what the individual quotas are, before we learn what the price is. And so that just adds to the frustration. So when you hear $2.50 Nova Scotia, what does that make you think?
Well, basically, look, that price that was put out there yesterday. They have a different system than we do. I think there might be a little bit more trust. I didn't get a chance to read up on it much this morning, but that's their minimum price. They have competition.
Last question for you.
they're going to bargain. They're going to bargain for again. That's their at the dock go fishing price. That will change for the season.
The last one. So I believe the Association for Seafood Producers has put forward their recommended price for the year. I don't know if the union has put theirs forward as of yet. I'm not even sure the process has been hammered out in full. But when the Premier was asked about the issue, he basically said that the fate is in the hands of the FFAW. Your thoughts?
The fate is not in the hands of the FFAW. What ASP came to the union with was not a price. Was a new structure or they're bargaining and they're negotiating on a formula, and the negotiating the formula that they produced to the union wasn't as good as the one that they previously talked about. So they're not bargaining in good faith.
I appreciate the time this morning, John. Would you like to say anything else?
No, look, the grand plan here, and this is what we're all afraid of, everybody's coming to realise. It's very simple. The companies here are colluding. Let's get all these independent fish harvesters out. Let's buy them out. Let's get. Then they'll go after the federal government and get the licensing changed. When they own enough of us, they'll get it changed, and you're going to see factory boats catching our products here. You're going to destroy rural Newfoundland. We're all finished. I
appreciate the time, John. Stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's go and take a break. When we come back, Brian is in the queue to talk about a tremendous anniversary of a real sporting feat. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Looking forward to this one. Line number 2. Brian, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
I'm pretty good. Paddy, some of your listeners probably in their younger days went to St. Bon's, and they're going to say, there goes that guy bragging again. But there was a senior hockey league when I was growing up as a little boy. There was 5 teams representing the major schools in the city: St. Pat's, St. Bon's, Holy Cross. The PWC were called the Guards and the Felians. And then I think it was 64 years this Saturday. St. Pat's beat St. Bon's for the Ball Trophy. That was the emblematic of senior hockey in those days. And the amazing thing is that St. Bon's had won that trophy 27 years in a row.
Yeah, just 1 second, Brian, because I really want to talk about this. I was supposed to mention this as soon as I came back. There's a couple of horses running up the Outer Ring Road by Logie Bay Road, off-ramp, so there's horses on the Outer Ring Road. Be careful, beware. Okay, back to the hockey. So you're right, it's February 16th of 1960, and you're also right that St. Bon's had won 27 boils, 16 straight between 1944 and 1960.
That's right.
St. Bon's versus St. Pat's was the rich Catholics versus the poor Catholics.
That's true. Well, actually, it was the other way. Well, St. Bon's were the rich. Yeah. And I'm in a seniors complex, Paddy, who are taking tremendous care of me. And there's a gentleman here, and we're always arguing. He says St. Pat's didn't win the Ball Trophy at Bell Island because, see, St. Bon's had a closed club. You had to go to St. Bon's. But anybody could play for St. Pat's. And yes, many of our members play for Bell Island. But, Paddy, it was a vicious tournament. I think it went 7 games. It was vicious. It was worse than when the Northeast used to play Montreal. And the games were called out on the OCM. Of course, Bob Cole did the call in those days.
Yep.
And I remember they won it on the eve of St. Patrick's Day. Now, St. Patrick's Day was a holy day of obligation for those of you who are Catholic. You had to go to Mass. And on St. Patrick's Day, you'd wear green and gold. But on that day, the day after we won the Ball Trophy, those who were St. Bon's supporters went to the Mass with blue and gold on. And I think to this day, they still have a hard time realizing that it's like Trump in the election. They have a hard time believing that St. Pat's won the Ball Trophy.
Well, they did, and it was a monumental upset. It went 6 games. The St. Pat's won in 6.
That's right, okay. Okay.
And there were some pretty famous guys that were on that team. Of course,
Yes.
St. Bon's were absolutely blocked with talent, and they played in the old stadium, which was apparently
That's
blocked as well that night. So, Don Johnson, the late great Don Johnson, was on that 64 team. And you're right, Bob Cole called the game, Game 6. He called all the games, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And I actually have read a transcript of Bob Cole's call, in particular of the opening goal, the first goal scored by Joe Kenny in game number 6. And here's some of what Cole had to say that night. The face-off will be inside St. Pat's blue line to the left of the goal. St. Pat's got the draw. They'll shoot it down the ice. Kenny's going in. Fardy's trying to catch him. He's all alone. He scores! Joe Kenny scores the first goal.
You just reminded me of it again.
Yeah, so then you had Don Johnson. I believe the captain was Jack Withers.
That's right.
Pat Barrington was on that team. Arthur Byrne was on that team. Yeah.
And St. Bon's had a Merv Green and gold. They had Jack Erdigan, and they had the Gillis brothers, who were great at baseball. So a lot of good players, and I'll always remember that. I'm 73 now. I was 10 years old when they won the cup, and I remember them coming up to St. Pat's and having a rally, and we saw the Boyle Trophy. It was just tremendous. And I always remember St. Patrick's Day, or the eve of St. Patrick's Day, really, as winning the cup. And I just wanted to phone in this morning and remind everybody I still remember,
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And Jack Erdigan, one of the finest skaters anyone has ever seen. And the Gillies boys were Billy and Joe.
That's right.
Yeah, and they were tremendous baseball players as well, as you rightfully point out. And I think the goaltender for that team, for St. Pat's that year, they went on to win again next year. They beat the Guards, I think, in the Boyle the following season as well. So I can't remember who might have been the goalie there. Barrington was in net. Sure he was.
Yeah.
Of course he was. Yeah.
It was just great. I always remember it. It was better than any Stanley Cup playoffs, Paddy.
Well, I remember reading the late Robin Short had written about this on the 50th anniversary, and he went on to talk about Canada at the 72 series and the Henderson goal and the Miracle on Ice when the Americans win the goal at Lake Placid in 1980. This was Newfoundland and Labrador senior hockey Miracle on Ice. St. Pat's beating St. Bon's in 1960.
Thanks for letting me come on, Paddy.
I'm glad you did. Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's pretty great stuff. I mean, those were the heydays, right? And a Boyle was a big deal. And get invited down to City Hall to celebrate your Boyle Championship, all very cool stuff. And yeah, Bob Cole called the game right here on VOCM in St. Pat's. They upended St. Bon's after they'd won 16 consecutive Boyles, February 16th, 1960. Fantastic. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 1. Barry, you're on the air.
Hello, Paddy.
Hi there.
I'm after sending you a few emails regarding home care in the community.
Oh, yes, sir. Now I know who you are. Go ahead.
So you have the basics of what I'm calling as far as we're a consumer-operated shared care system. As a matter of fact, we were the first one in the province that were incorporated, and we've been in operation for 33 years. A couple of years ago, we requested more funding to the powers that be. So that's 2 years ago. There hasn't been an answer or correspondence of very much. So February 21st, I received a letter of notification that the company will be no longer funded in 30 days. So that 30 days now is counting down to 9, whereby there's 4 individuals totally dependent on a 24-hour care system. And that's scheduled care, flexibility, emergency intervention in the nighttime, and all the needs that are involved, not only with the personal care, but domestic work as well, as far as homemaking and clean apartments and laundry and meal preparation and dishes and the whole gamut when it comes to home support.
What exactly does your organization do, like operationally speaking, or what kind of supports do you offer that requires the funding from the provincial government? Just so the listeners have an idea, because I've seen all your emails.
Yeah, we provide access to 24-hour care We have one personal care attendant that's here doing 12-hour shifts. So we have about 9 different workers. Some work part-time, some are full-time. And I got to say, first up, right off the bat, I need to say, without my Nigerian workers and community that I have a liaison with through the Nigerian Association, we'd have no home support workers. And the 2 local girls that I have, one has been here 30 years and one has been here 27. So the company itself is well proven in taking care of having access to 24-hour care, and this has developed over a lot of bumps and bruises and in the community as far as trying to access personal care attendants because they're a dying breed. Like Jerry Earl was on this morning saying about the home care business. I mean, and he said, well, 95% are women, but no, there's a lot of males, mostly Nigerian. I can't give enough praise to my Nigerian brothers that I have working for us.
Yeah, a friend of mine has home care support in place, 2 different shifts, 2 different people, both Nigerian men.
Yeah. And without them, we'd have no home support workers.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. So
what they're trying to do is, well, Jerry Byrne was on the news there last week saying, well, the federal government is trying to fix something that's not broke. Well, the provincial government is trying to do the same thing with our program. We only get $20,000 a month to have access to 24-hour care. Our system is 100% proven, and there's no grounds or reason or rhyme for them to hand this company only a personal attack on me because I called them out on my emails as far as the inefficiencies of government and the MHAs as well. Tom Osborne is one, Siobhan Cody is another. So now Helen Hottenheimer and Barry Penton's office have been informed what's going on as well. And I'm going to be talking to, thanks for Joanne McDonald for calling in the other day to talk about the setup that they were launching over at the university. I went over because I worked with Joanne and Mary Reed years ago and on different ad hoc committees as far as the independent living movement and other different committees as well. And I'm getting Nancy Reed involved from the Coalition of Persons with Disabilities as well.
Barry, how many people are supported through your organization with that $20,000 a month?
4 individuals that are totally dependent, 100%, on home support. And for myself, I'm a C5 quadriplegic. I need 24-hour care myself, but I don't want an attendant to be sitting with me day and night and that kind of stuff. I try to portray myself as being more independent than what I really am. But we have access to the care. We have an attendant care unit. We're a registered company, incorporated, since 1987. We're up to date on all our bills, payments, everything with the company's deeds, workers' comp premiums, liability insurance, and the workers here do a top-notch #1 job. And if there are any workplace health and safety concerns, they know a worker can come back to me, and if there's some being the employer, they can come back to me and bring it up, and we'll get together and see what needs to be done.
It's a strange set of circumstances whereby something has been working, and you talk about Minister Byrne saying that the feds are trying to fix something that isn't broken. Well, in this case, it looks like the province is trying to break something that is working.
That's right, severely. And they say it's no longer feasible. $20,000 a month is pittance for access to 24-hour care for 4 people that need it. We live in an apartment building. So, is all in one building where our tenants need to go. Everyone has their own apartment. It's not like a community living thing whereby we just have a bedroom and we eat at a common kitchen and all that. Mm-hmm. We have our own apartments at Rotary Manor that was set up. Like I said, we were incorporated in 1987. We started here with the new building in May 1st, 1991, and been in operation ever since. No problems. As a matter of fact, the community health nursing that come in, they see our apartment's so clean, and our workers come and help out with any kind of nursing issue, whether it's a dressing that needs to be changed or a pressure sore tended to or whatever it is. And all our workers are satisfied to work here. And now they're turning to putting it over to an agency that cannot provide what we have. And our workers aren't going with an agency. And they're not training the new people in to come take their jobs. And as a matter of fact, with the Nigerian community that I have, they're all in support of this company and myself as being considered the employer. The name of the company now is Cooperated Support System. And it's all done, we're set up as a board. So they underhandedly came in and talked to the other people and told them that this was automatically going to an agency in 30 days. Which agency do you want? No choice. And you can't do that with a board. A board of directors need to meet and make decisions as a group. So they're bordering on a takeover that's probably illegal to start with.
It's hard to understand why this is being done, not only the way it is, but why it is, period.
Yeah.
Barry,
I'll give you the response. I sent you the response as well from Siobhan Cody.
Yep.
Of what her response was, that she agreed that Newfoundland and Health Support was making the right decision on the basis of the health and needs of the clients and the employees, which is untrue. There's no issues here. If there were issues, why not sit down with us and address them? And as a matter of fact, 2 years ago, they were supposed to come on board with us because now with workplace health and safety, you need a committee set up with a employee representative person who can speak on behalf of the employees. We have that anyway, but they were supposed to be involved in sending the social worker in and an OT and or physio every 3 to 4 months to make sure everything was working properly. But we've been doing it anyway.
I appreciate the time and the topic this morning, Barry. Would you like to say anything else before I have to go?
One more thing. You don't hear a lot about home care problems anymore on Openline and in the news as much, is because clients, are barely doing with what they have, and they're afraid to speak out because of the repercussions, like what's going on here now. That's my opinion.
And you could be right. And if people are worried about that type of pushback or ramifications, all they need to do is just say that they're caller on line 3. And that's fine. We can keep names out of it if people are worried about that kind of stuff. But, we have to understand what it means. If we're talking about aging in place and appropriate hours and level of home care versus institutionalizing people, which has been the go-to.
Well, why is Tom Osborne throwing more funding at nursing homes? Because the next step from the community is a hospital bed in a nursing home. No, fund what's in place already. Put your money where your mouth is and support the people, seniors and young people with disabilities and that depend on home care. Like Jerry Earl said, put a good wage there, some benefits to attract more people that are absolutely 100% needed in the community.
And it costs more to have someone in a long-term care bed in a long-term care facility versus in their own home with appropriate home care. We also know that to be true. Barry, I appreciate the time, sir. Keep me in the loop with the emails.
Yes, Patty, I sure will. And I hope more people do phone in regarding home care.
Fair enough. They're always welcome.
Because there's a tangle in the community.
By the sounds of it, no argument here. Thank you, Barry.
All right. Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Just before we get to the break, of course, great call with Brian about the magical victory of St. Pat's over St. Bon's in 1960, February 16th, to win the Boyle. And apparently I said, Joe Gillies? Well, I know better. Bill and Ted. I knew both gentlemen personally, but an email from Doc. He was a grade 11 student at St. Bon's. It was a sad, sad day. And yes, it was Bill and Ted Gillies, not Joe. I can't believe I said Joe because I knew both. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. I don't know if you've seen this story. It's the first time it's crossed my screen. So on a flight, Air Canada Flight Rouge 1879 flying from St. Lucia to Toronto on March the 6th, a customer was experiencing some sort of medical issue. They had to reroute the flight. There was a birth mid-flight. The lady gave birth. A couple of doctors happened to be on board and assisted in the delivery of a baby born mid-flight on an Air Canada flight. That's wild. All right, let's keep going here. Let's go to line number 3. Joy, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you, me boy?
Doing okay. How about you?
Oh, I'm okay. First off, before I get to my subject, I'd like to talk about the government and how crooked they are. They're as crooked as the days are long. We should have a lot of Pinocchios in the government here in Newfoundland and in Ottawa. Jerry Byrne is trying to take all the credit for the new hospital, but that goes to Eddie Joyce. He fought long and hard to get it. So Jerry Byrne, don't try to take it away from him like you did something. You did nothing. And Tom Osborne, that lies more than enough. And Fury also. Tom Osborne, it wouldn't hurt for him to put a bit of life in his body. He looks like he's just hanging there like a puppet.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it.
Anyway,
but, I mean, the Cornerbrook Hospital was first tabled, well over a decade ago. It was on, it was off, it was on, it was off. I believe it was first announced under the Tories. It might have been Williams or Dunderdale were the premier at the time. Then it went away, then it came back, then it went away. It's been kicked around for a long time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And Trudeau has got Canada in a hole, dug so deep we'll never recover from it. He's ruined our country, as you well know. He's funneling money. He gives it to all other countries, and he visits them, and it looks like he's giving them money, but they're funneling money is what they're doing.
What does that mean?
It means they're lining their own pockets. It goes to their own bank accounts, a lot of it. Fishermen will never have anything because Trudeau and Fury government are all going to make sure they take everything from them, and they're doing a good job, and there'll be nothing left here in Newfoundland.
What has been taken from the fishermen by either Fury or Trudeau? What does that mean?
Well, the redfish, for one thing. They won't give them any of that, not enough to talk about if they're giving them anything.
19% of what we don't even know what the total is. We're thinking 25,000 tons.
And they're just taking everything from them, giving them low prices for their catches, and they're going to have to travel so far to sell their product, and and so on, and it keeps going. Anyways, Patty, the reason I'm calling, I tried to get through the other day, but the gentleman that answered the phone wouldn't put me through to you. I wanted to talk about some cod bites, haddock bites by Highliner, signature cuts, roasted garlic and herb. I had some on for my supper, and I was eating it, and they're only small bites. They're breaded. They're delicious, by the way. I can't knock the taste. I was chewing it up, and I thought I lost the filling out of my tooth. And it's lucky I didn't swallow, because if I had, I figure I would have choked or been in a hospital. There was a bone in it, thick on one end and like a needle on the other end. I couldn't believe it. And I was very concerned, because I thought if I'd swallowed that, if that went into your stomach, it could puncture your stomach, puncture your bowels, or whatever, or you'd choke on it. It was that big. And it was very thick. But like I said, just like a needle on the end. And I was thinking a senior or a child or anybody comes to that, eating that. And I broke apart another one, and there were small bones in that also. So that batch guaranteed had bones in it. So I thought I'd let the public know that in case they're buying it, to make sure they check it. Because if they don't, their child could choke on it, or a senior, or whatever. And I buy these all the time. It's the first time I ever come across breaded haddock bites with bones in it.
Did you call the company?
Yes, I did, and all I got was a refund for what I paid for them. And she didn't seem too concerned, and I told her I was going to call the talk show, and I told her it goes right across through the states, and she said, well, it's up to you what you do. You can call if you want, and da-da-da. So I thought I'd call in and let people know, just in case they're buying this stuff, and it should be taken off the shelves, this batch.
Yeah, I don't know how widespread the problem would be, but quality control for food producers is pretty important stuff, regardless of its bones or anything else, because we hear recalls, I would suggest, far too often for, things that should be in control at the site, at the processing facility. But Joy, I'm glad you didn't swallow it and puncture anything.
Is Joyce, by the way.
Oh, sorry, Joyce. I got Joy on my screen.
And Patty, I'd like to talk about long-term care for a minute. I should have done this years ago, and I didn't. But I was up there, and I seen many things that was really disturbing up there on University Avenue here in Corner Brook. My husband was in there before he passed away. And there was one time, there was this lady, she was going around, she had a touch of dementia, not a lot. She was very brazen and very strong, and she would threaten people. She'd go in the rooms and steal stuff. Well, that goes on a lot anyway, because I had things taken from my husband, even his eyeglasses. I was in one day, and I found out that there was a man in the next room, and he was yelling all the time. So anyway, this woman I'm talking about, she shouldn't have been let loose to start with, because she went in, and he was a tiny little man. There was nothing to him as it was. And she beat that man. She closed the door. She beat him black and blue, and that's just off from where the main nurse desk is. And the next day, he died. And there was nothing ever said about it. Nothing. And there was another time, there was a woman standing naked in the doorway with her clothes all in her arms, and said a man went in and took all her clothes off. And I had to call the nurses to come and see to her. And another time, there was an elderly lady, I bet you she was 100 years old. They had her bed up as straight as you could get it, and she was asleep, and her face was on the iron part of the bed, like she would fall out, the sides weren't up. And I went down and I said, somebody get up there right away and take care of this lady. I mean, the stuff I was seeing, and people tied in their chairs right in the main desk where the nurses are. And I'd go to get water for my husband or my mother, because there was different occasions. And they'd all have their hands out. They're tied in the chairs. They got no water. Nobody giving them anything. And I'd have to go get water for them all. And some of them I'd have to hold the glass to their lips so they could have a drink. Now, I mean, this is ridiculous, and if people only knew the half that goes on. There was a young lady, she was in the main area, and she would always take her clothes off her top. And I told the nurses, but they said there was nothing they could do about it. But the men there looking at her, I mean, she was only maybe 30 if she was that. And it was Halloween.
Okay.
Went in one day, and I thought they had her painted up, her face. One side of her face was as black as the top of a stove. And I said, oh, my God, you got her face done for Halloween. They said, no, she fell. But, I mean, and I never seen her after, so I don't know if she passed or what.
I don't know. Joyce, I gotta take off here now, but I appreciate the time. There's obviously lots of concerns inside long-term care facilities for the safety of the residents, no doubt about it.
Yes. Well, Patty, you have a lovely day.
Thanks, Joyce.
And take aid. Not everybody's stupid out here. All right, Patty, I really appreciate you taking the call.
Take good care.
You too. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Before we get to the break, let's go to line number 1. Caller, you're on the air.
Oh, good day, Patty. How are you, sir?
Great, sir. You?
Not too bad. Just want to give everybody a heads up. Heading east from Corner Brook, just east of Rapid Power Sports there in Little Rapids. There's a big van out in the ditch there, half on the ditch and half on the road. Just wanting everybody to slow down and take your time. The first responders and the police department are on scene. So I just want to give everybody a heads up to slow down. The roads are really bad, covered in slush, really slippery. So just wanting everybody to slow down and be safe. Good piece of advice, and I appreciate the heads up. Thanks for the call. You're welcome, sir. Have a good day. You too. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right, let's get to news. And so just in a reference, or not the news, the break, just in reference to the story that I spoke about on the 6th of March, there was a baby delivered in midair, in flight. So then that brought a reaction from one of the listeners saying, you know, regarding the birth mid-flight, apparently sometimes people seeking Canadian citizenship will fly to Canada in late-stage pregnancy. If a child is born in Canada, I believe they're a Canadian citizen. You're 100% right. Now, there's all sorts of issues inside of that. It's an interesting comment, though, because it has happened specifically in British Columbia. And they used to track the numbers about how many hospitals saw births of folks who were not from here. So inside the Citizenship Act, it's 100% right. If you are born here, you are automatically a Canadian citizen. That gives people pause for concern that somewhere down the road that person maybe will never live here beyond being discharged from the hospital, go back to whatever country, can absolutely come and enjoy the benefits of being a Canadian citizen. But inside the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, they actually refer to this, right? The frequency is not as much as some people have been led to believe, but in BC it was indeed a concern that was red flagged, sir, a while ago. There's also the concept of if you are coming in a late-stage pregnancy and you're coming specifically to give birth in Canada, you need to obtain a temporary resident visa. It's automatic. They are valid for 6 months or less, but those are some of the moving parts in that particular story. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. So in an effort not to shortchange the caller in the queue, we'll get to the news here and then we'll come back and speak to the gentleman on the topic that he's called about this morning. When it comes to our conversation that we had with John Efford, of course, fish harvester, and they're looking for what they're referring to as free enterprise. So more control over a variety of things, the variety of moving parts inside the fishery. And some of the thought, and he did not say that this is part of their concept of free enterprise, but it's long been talked about, is most industries, the raw material is given the exact value it's due. And that would be with competitive nature on the buyer side. Very much unlike how we operate in this province. But an emailer points out a potential shortcoming in that concept. And they're not wrong. Let's just say that was the case. It's easy to see how the processing sector could be absolutely battered if that was what was going on. Because even if we're talking about when an outside buyer, if that was such a thing, came to the province knowing full well that the processors here were paying, let's just say snow crab, at $2.50, which is the number currently in place in Nova Scotia. And if someone was willing to go $2.55,
You know full well that every cent counts when we're talking about whatever species is taken out of the water, and given the fractured relationship between the harvester and the processors, then even if it was out of spite to take $2.50 from an outside buyer versus sell it to the local plant, that might be something that absolutely could be part of the outcome if that's what happened. Add to it, it's not just the big processing companies. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that the plant workers are also part of the fishery. Now, for many plants, absolutely inside the world of snow crab, there are tons of plant workers that are brought in on temporary foreign worker visas to be part of the sector. You know, there is a concern with the average age of people working in the plants. There is a concern of people even wanting or willing to take on what is seasonal and limited hours sometimes in the plants. Now, last year, as we know, when they finally got the snow crab boats out on the water, the plant workers were absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of work they were able to do. And there's lots of goods and bads that come with that. But there's a couple of things that we don't always consider. The plant workers are part of the processing sector, which does indeed lead to a potential complication if you're the union representing the harvesters and plant workers. It's hard to serve two masters. So there's some issues I think we can also consider on that front. We're on Twitter. We're on VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. But our favorite is when you join us live on the air to talk about whatever's on your mind. You can elaborate on what you heard, pick up a topic of your choosing. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break, and then we're coming back.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Charlie, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Paddy.
Morning.
I won't refer to the weather, but just the fact we're alive, right?
Yeah, well, I'm here.
Yeah, I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to congratulate Team Gushu on their great win. That was something else, but anyway.
Magnificent.
I'd like to comment this morning on a topic that probably won't go over too well. Contrast some of your callers there. You got guy Tom that calls in all the time, and last week you had a young woman talking about basically living simply on this globe, how necessary it was. And Tom talks about that sometimes as well. And then you got a contrast. One guy calls in, he's obsessed with the carbon tax. He seems like he can't get it anywhere else, or can't get any action on this. And the other guy calls in about oil and gas, what the feds are doing to us and how much we need it and so on. And the contrast in the two messages from those two people versus the last two I mentioned is night and day. The way I see it, we've got people with no limits. At least they think there's no limits, living in a limited world. They talk about groceries gone up and going, and lumber prices and so on. And we can relate a lot of that to greed and to corporate greed and so on. Some of it we can relate to scarcity. The less you have of things in this world, the more, of course, they'll go up. And it reminded me of that book I read once called Affluenza, How Overconsumption is Killing Us, fellow John DeGraff. And it seems like to me that people don't make connections with the larger picture. They see what's in front of them, like the carbon tax, but they don't see how living on this planet and living the way we're living, with definite limits to growth, they don't seem to think that this is a problem. And it may not be a problem for us old turds, myself and those callers, but it certainly will be a problem, and is a problem for billions of people around this planet. Because for people to have the lifestyle that many of us have, that is only made possible because billions of us can't have that. We have to live in poverty or in a survival mode all the time. And I just think that we don't seem to have a lot of conversations on this, except for a scattering caller that, like Tom and like that young woman to call attention to this. Math scores and reading scores, as vital as they are, they won't kill us. Overconsumption, as Buddy says, will kill us.
But they're both directly related. With all due respect, they're directly related.
I'm sorry?
They're directly related issues.
Yes.
Well, they absolutely are. Your educational progress, your academic understanding of the issues is driven in school in K-12, and that includes math, science, and reading. Because the things that you're talking about, if you don't have good comprehensive understanding of those three areas, you're never going to be able to grasp what you're talking about.
Yes, I agree totally with that. If you take it to what's not being said here, though, is if you don't go to these other areas in depth to discuss them and get students understanding them, then no matter how good your reading scores and math scores are, it's kind of beside the point. They're good for the labor force and so on, but they may not be good for looking at what's happening in this little planet of ours.
Disagree, because it's about comprehension and critical thinking. If you're scoring low in math, science, and reading, then it's quite likely that your critical thinking and comprehension scores will be not reflective of being able to understand the issues of the day.
We're not disagreeing on that. I've got no problem with what you said. A good reading ability lets you understand these other things. What I'm saying is, if these other things I'm talking about, like overconsumption and so on in our society, Joey said one time, he said, our wants will become our needs. And that's true of every society. If you look at the way we live, most of us live to acquire, to see how many toys, how many bigger, can we get a bigger vehicle, can we get a bigger house? What I'm saying is schools do not deal with the second half of the equation, which is overconsumption, and that our lifestyles cannot be sustained on this planet. And that's very important to future generations, in fact, to our the one coming up. And the fewer conversations we have on this, we can always be talking about healthcare and so on, and it's needed, and all the other daily concerns. But if we don't get to the big picture and look at the connections, what's happening across this globe, I'll give you an example. Australia, they had they had last year, and they have it now, record high temperatures. They had fires, they had floods, they had drought in some areas. They're big on renewables, but the irony of it is they're also big on producing coal and sending it around the world. So the very thing that's killing them and hurting them as a people is also sustaining a lot of them in jobs, which is why they won't get rid of the coal, right? So we got to make those connections, Patty, at some point, and to not make them, it's at our peril. That's about all I can say on it, I guess.
Well, gluttony is the root of many of our problems. I don't think that's in dispute. I mean, even if you look at just how careless we are with things like food. You know, the amount of food wastage in the country is over the top. You know, at the exact same time, millions of Canadians go into food banks, yet we throw away more food than those folks would ever be able to eat in the course of a year. So there's some obvious disconnects there. And interesting, you talk about someone who calls about the carbon tax. I'm not sure who that caller might be that you're talking about. But, you know, what's not factored in when we talk about the price of food and what has contributed to it, whether it be food inflation and or general inflation, we've just allowed the conversation to be guided almost in full by politicians, which is obviously going to lead to horrible outcomes for actual understandings of what's going on here. So if we talk about global supply chains, it's not just about a COVID hiccup. You mentioned floods and fires. If you look at what the floods and fires and prolonged droughts has meant to the price of food and the availability of food, that's every bit more impactful on the price tag than carbon tax. It just is. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a Tory to not be able to acknowledge that some of those issues are driven by some of the things that you hate regarding climate tax or climate change is the carbon tax, which I think is another built-in problem, the reductive thinking. Any mention of carbon tax, for some people, the only thing that they can think of when they hear that is carbon tax. When in fact, that doesn't mean the conversation is just those two things in the same sentence. It's a bigger, more complicated issue. And it just absolutely is. Fires and floods and droughts are a bigger contribution to the price of food than the carbon tax. The end.
Well, there's a limit. There's a limit to everything. There's a limit to clean water. There's a limit to clean air, forests, and you name it. You cannot live on this planet as a species and act as if there's no limits. That's why that book, No Limits to Growth, was published about 30 years ago. But anyway, anybody who'd like to read about overconsumption, affluenza is killing us, I'd advise them to read it. If they think that I'm overemphasizing this or I'm hung up on this, let them get some facts there and look at what's really happening on this little planet. You know, one time I saw a UFO, Patty, and I've told you about that many times. You know what that did for me? It gave me a more of a global view than I had before. I could look at the globe as opposed to looking at little old Newfoundland or whatever, and I'm thankful for that. I know many others who've had similar sightings, astronauts who go in space and that. They get a global view. That's lacking in our society. We're hung up in our wants and needs, our immediate wants and needs. Anyway, that's my philosophizing for today.
Thanks for the call, Charlie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. I mean, gluttony is a problem. Of course it is, because when we talk about things like reduce and reuse and recycle, those types of things, reduce never gets the kind of attention that it requires, and because that is basically the nature of the beast. Certainly in the developed world, the amount of gluttony and overkill is undeniable, I would suggest. And, you know, Charlie just made mention of space. Nice dovetail with our next caller. It's Lillian Fiddler, and Lillian and Jim Fiddler are going to facilitate historic student contact in St. John's, Newfoundland. What they're doing is working with grade 9 students in St. John's to facilitate communications with an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Very cool. Lillian Fiddler, right after this. Welcome back to the show. Just before we get to Lillian, let's get a highway condition update on 2. Corey, you're on the air.
Well, good morning, Patty. I just want to let your viewers know that I'm a taxi driver, and it's very, very slippery from the Bayburt to Springdale. Ask that drivers be very careful making their way through.
Yeah, I'm getting reports of slippery and snowy conditions in a lot of areas. So if you are in and around driving where Corey just mentioned, it's slick under rubber, so be careful.
Yes, and I just want to give out to the Department of Highways that they're always doing a great job, and I just want to give that out to them this morning, and thank you very much.
I appreciate the time. Be safe out there, Corey.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, now let us go to line number 4. Good morning, Lillian Fiddler. You're on the air.
Hello, Patty.
Hello there. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I saw the email and immediately forwarded it along to Dave because I want to talk about this issue. So what are you and Jim doing?
What we're doing is we're facilitating a contact with the International Space Station, and it will be a direct contact between students here in St. John's. There are 6 schools participating, and they're grade 9 students. So, that's basically what we're doing, and it's happening the week of March 25th. We're not sure what date yet. It depends, actually, when the ISS is going to be closest to the ground station, and the ground station may be in Italy or somewhere. We're not sure where, but this contact is facilitated between NASA and amateur radio operators around the world. So, so that's basically it.
So, I mean, I don't know anything about amateur radio operators and or ham radio operators. So, like, where are you going to be physically?
Okay, we're going to be here in St. John's, and so we will be broadcasting this live on YouTube, and so anybody can join in. They can watch. We will be having a presentation ahead of the actual contact, and the presentation will be, we have Dr. Robert Thirsk, he's going to be there, and Tamitha Skov, who's a space weather woman, she's going to be there as well, and some amateur radio operators. And at the end, the actual students will be communicating directly with an astronaut aboard the ISS, and there will be about 20 questions they have for the astronaut, and so that will be, about 20 minutes long.
help us understand what the partnership or the assistance of the ARISS, the Amateur Radio and the International Space Station. So how does that partnership work? So is it a matter of them being prepared to take your radio frequency call, or how does it actually functionally work?
Yes, there's a lot of preparation that goes into this. It's very well orchestrated. ARISS, ARISS, is an organization that works with NASA, and they coordinate this contact. So it's basically, it's kind of school children all over the world participate. There might be one week it could be a school in Honduras, another week it could be a school in Italy or somewhere else, anyone who wants to participate, and they organize this. So you have to be an amateur radio operator to help set it up, so that's why we're involved here. But also, St. John's is, we have that connection with amateur radio. Marconi receiving the first wireless transmission here at Signal Hill. So this is a very historic thing, we feel, for St. John's and for Newfoundland. And it's something we feel, students here should really be involved, and they will be. So there's 6 schools taking that are going to participate here. So, yeah, I think that's, it's very exciting, actually.
Can you tell us which 6 schools? Because there'll be lots of other grade 9 students jealous of those 6.
Well, all I know, I don't know which schools they are, actually. I'm working with the School District Association, NLEDC, I think they're called. But we can post it. Let's see. People can go to vo1rv.com. That's Victor Oscar 1 Romeo Victor.com. And that is Jim's call sign. Mine is vo1xyl. You can also email me at vo1xyl vo1xylnetwork@gmail.com if anyone does want to get in touch. It is going to be very interesting, and again, it's St. John's is kind of like the birthplace of telecommunications. So we really feel that this is an important and historic thing for Newfoundland.
So it's going to be a cool experience to talk to an astronaut who's on the International Space Station. 20 questions in a Q&A session. But are you trying to achieve some loftier goals here regarding inspiration to get involved in fields that lead to this type of work?
Absolutely. That's the whole mandate of ARISS. Their mandate is to encourage children to go into the STEM fields, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And it does inspire as well. You can see, I've watched videos of other children around the world who've made the contact, and you can see the excitement on their faces, and it definitely is encouraging.
Lillian, is amateur radio the same if I refer to it as ham radio?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. How popular is it?
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of losing popularity in a way because, of the internet, but it shouldn't, because there's lots of reasons to be involved in amateur radio. And actually, youth around the world, it's gaining popularity. There's a Facebook group called YOTA, Y-O-T-A, and that's Youth on the Air. And they have all kinds of interesting things that they do, and it's amazing. And you can see that they have different field days and conferences, and you see kids building radios, and they're actually the future because they're coming up with ways to incorporate amateur radio with the internet and with modern technology. So they are actually the future of amateur radio. And also, don't forget that amateur radio operators are the ones that are there in emergencies. When all other forms of telecommunications might go down, amateur radio operators are there all around the world, and they're ready for emergencies and to relay messages and that kind of thing. So it is an important field, and it is a good one as well for example, the astronaut that we will be talking to on the international radio, on the ISS, they will be a ham as well, an amateur radio operator.
That's what I was going to ask. You said it's important, and I figured it was about emergency communications, which is absolutely true and has proved to be vital in the past. This is a pretty general question, Lillian. Like, if I'm a ham radio operator, do I have like designated times where we're going to speak to other ham operators that I know, or do you surf frequencies looking for someone to talk to? How does it work when you sit down in front of your own radio?
It's both, really. You can schedule a QSO, we call it, a communication QSO. You can schedule it with another ham radio operator, or they have all kinds of contests and things as well, where you can just call CQ, and anybody that can hear you on your frequency or on whatever frequency you're on, they might come back to you, and they could be anywhere in the world. So you don't necessarily know who you're going to be talking to, and that's kind of the fun of it as well, because you can talk to people and just randomly, but it's also a very, very, I guess for lack of a better word, safe community. These people are, ham radio operators. They're, you have to take exams and, it's not difficult. Don't get me wrong there. Anybody can do it. And the last person I saw on this YODA, Youth on the Air Facebook group, she's 9 years old. She just got her license. So it's possible for anybody to do it, but there's lots of strict protocols, I guess is what I should say.
Including what? Because, when we talk about, say, communications via the internet, it's the wild, wild west. Virtually none in the way of regulations in place. So what sort of protections are in place regarding amateur radio?
Well, you can't. There's kind of unwritten rules, but it's there is a protocol. You can't swear, for example. There's no advertising whatsoever. You can't advertise products or. And also, it's just such a great community that people are always watching out for each other. Everyone has a call sign, and that call sign is linked to a database, so you can check that database to make sure, the person is an actual amateur radio operator if you wanted to. But so it is policed, but not by anybody other than the actual amateur radio operators themselves. And it's an absolutely amazing community. If you're an amateur radio operator and you travel somewhere else to a different country and you get in trouble, all you have to do when you're there is just call out on a radio, find out what amateur radio operators there are in the community, and someone is sure to come to your aid. We've had that experience ourselves, actually.
It sounds like a fascinating event and community to be part of. So it's the week of March 25th to the 27th. 6 lucky schools and their grade 9 students will be facilitating a conversation with an astronaut aboard the ISS, the International Space Station. Lillian, good luck with it. Thanks for making time for the show.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Stay in touch.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There you go. That sounds like a blast. Let's take a break. When we come back, Albert's in the queue to talk about affordable housing up in Happy Valley Goose Bay. Don't go away.
Nutrition, exercise, keeping the cold at bay. Whatever keeps you feeling great, the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Albert, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning to you.
First-time caller, sir.
Welcome to the show.
Many a time. Hello?
I appreciate your time as a first-timer. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'd like to share an experience that I'm trying to get into a low-income apartment, if I may.
Go ahead.
So it's getting close to my retirement now, and as I reach the age, and some elements won't keep me working much longer, and as I applied for low-income housing there 4 years back, because I knew a retirement will come. And I did get a letter back stating that my income was too high. Eligible for a low-income places here in that Valley Goose Bay area
you cannot make more than 32,500. But this is what I don't understand, Patty, is in other parts of Labrador, the maximum amounts are up to 60 and 65,000.
And that's why things like, thresholds need to make sense being based on region. So it's one thing if I live on the southwest coast versus if I live in St. John's versus if I live in Labrador. So it's a fair point you're making. Just having that one cut and dry threshold might not be applicable where people live.
Absolutely. Somebody might argue the point. The reason being is maybe the cost of living is more expensive there, so they're allowed to make more money. And maybe so in the North Coast communities, I would agree, that is. But over in Lab West, I don't think, for an example, that we buy a chicken here in Goose Bay at $12. I don't think the chicken is going to be $24 in Labrador City.
No, well, I mean, we do see the sticker prices of food. People send me pictures all the time from Labrador. It's extraordinary. Well, I think I've got it bad by shopping where I do in the East End, nowhere near what people face in Labrador. Same thing can be said for a single detached home. It's just a different set of circumstances.
Yeah, but I mean, Patty, I think we could all understand some differences, but when you're going to pay double the amount, I think that's a little bit much. So in order for me to qualify for 2025, I'm on OAS and CPP now. So from January to December, Patty, my estimate, I will get around $16,000, okay, on that fixed income. And for me to stay under 32,500, I had to resign from my work in 2 months and 2 weeks' work, just because, so I could qualify in 2024 for an apartment, maybe in 2025.
And it shouldn't be that difficult. You shouldn't have to give something up just to get the very basics.
Well, absolutely. Like, I'm not asking no government or no particular housing corporation or anything like that, whether it be NLA housing or Native. I'm not asking for them to pay my way. I'm just trying to see if I can fit in the system somewhere instead of waiting another year after you retire in order to see if you qualify.
I agree with you. And, there's all kinds of areas where people are told, well, here's your option to get some additional support, whether it be telling married couples, well, you have to get divorced so that, your net family income isn't X, Y, or Z, which disqualifies you for access to one pot of money or another. I know sometimes when we talk about the level of bureaucracy required to manage some of these systems, if everything is case-by-case basis and not with some well-understood and well-defined thresholds or protocols in place, then we can indeed create ourselves an even bigger behemoth of government. But even adjustments made region to region, that kind of makes sense to me, because we are really talking about two different circumstances. I know where you're coming from, Albert.
Yeah. Well, so I'm off work now. I'm done now. So it looks like in 2 months I will have to give up my regular apartment, because I cannot pay for a regular apartment on a fixed income, and I'm not allowed to make any more money because I do want to be under that 32,005 come end of December this year. So I think this is a little bit much and I'm not going to gloat, but I'll tell you, I worked 44 plus years. I paid my way. I think the little bit of money that I paid into my taxes I think I paid for some of my MHA salaries, some of my councilman salaries. I think I need some help right now.
It sounds like it. I appreciate the time as a first timer. Anything else you'd like to add this morning, Albert?
No, I just wanted to make the public aware of that, and talking to people around the coffee shops, and some people didn't even realize that we're only allowed to make $32,500 in order to qualify for an apartment. as a retiree coming up, a senior. I'm going on 66 years old, so I cannot afford a regular apartment on a fixed income. But the thing is, why have you got to wait because I made too much money last year?
Now, there's always going to be some sort of income threshold for eligibility, whether we talk about the dental plan or affordable housing or a covered apartment. But it's absolutely, region to region, I think, is the trick here, as opposed to having some sort of number in play, because it does make sense to me that if someone is making enough to afford their own apartment, then we have to include what their income is to make some sort of eligibility decisions. But your circumstance is different than someone who's, say, for instance, living in, Marystown. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. I wouldn't want a low-income apartment if I was allowed to make $65,000, Patty.
Yeah, that's right.
I wouldn't want. No, I wouldn't. So this is where I'm to now. So this summer, I'm hoping to see what happens come the fall. Corner talk says that this 32.5 might go up to 38,000. Yay.
It's not a big fluctuation, and there are, generally speaking, it doesn't happen annually to adjust those things to, say, for instance, CPI or the price index, but there are always going to have to be circumstances where you factor in the reality of life, the purchasing power of your dollar, inflationary pressures, yes, the consumer price index. There's a variety of things that we use to measure where we should be with those cutoffs. But, Albert, I do appreciate making time as a first-timer. You're always welcome.
Thank you for my call, and I will be in touch. You may hear some more on it as more news that I hear.
Whenever you like, at your convenience.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right. That really does become, I think, an important part of the conversation. And, even if we talk about national thresholds for eligibility, there's a huge difference between, say, let's just use dental care. So for those who are eligible and don't have private insurance, and there's still some confusion there, so the cutoff is $90,000 for net family income. If you earn $70,000 or less, there's no copays. But if I make my entire family, because that's a household number, if our household income is $89,500, that brings a different set of pressures and circumstances if I live in St. John's versus if I live in Vancouver or Toronto or Calgary. It just does. Now, not to say that those programs can be so splintered that we can change it dramatically from area to area, but it's just the facts of the life. It does make a difference where you live based on how expensive it is to live in one city or one province or another. But in this province alone, I think we can easily recognize some of the different circumstances that present themselves versus some parts of the island versus Labrador, and whether or not the number that Albert talks about, the cutoff of 32,500, is related directly to your ability to get the affordable apartment that he needs as a retiree. So anyway, let's take our final break of the morning. When we come back, Peter Leonard is in the queue. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 2. Good morning, Peter. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning.
I didn't really intend to go on this morning, but anyway, I've listened to your program there, and I haven't been hearing a whole lot of people, either fishers or anybody for that matter, talking about the protester. And, like today is, I'd like for you to invite, I'm not telling you what to do, but I just suggested you invite Minister Lovelace or Mr. Fury or whoever, or ASP or a fish processor, just what their take is on all this. We already got the demonstrators' take, but, there is fish harvesters who can phone in and put their opinion forward, because the news coverage is not really great when it comes to NTV or CBC. But there's people have got an interest in it, and I think that, it's a high time somebody take this seriously, because momentum is building and the numbers are building. And, not only that, today is the 12th of March, and on or before the 25th of March, people will be putting crab gear on board. And if history repeats itself on the 29th of March, on a Friday, that's usually when the management plan comes down. So that tells me the 1st of April, or in that week, the crab season will be open. So, nobody wants to go through this year, either a processor or a harvester or anybody, wants to go through what they went through last year. So somebody is going to have to step up and take those protesters seriously and try to get this resolved because, Paddy, it's like that plant in St. Mary's. I think it's St. Mary's Fisheries or something like that out there. They got a license to, I think they're the only one that got a cap on their licenses on how much they can process. Those people are after proving themselves last year. And, I think for the most part they got a background into the fishery and apparently they got money. Well, to start with, they're paying their plant workers, I think it's more than $24 an hour. So, why would government, for the not want to lift that restriction? It don't make no sense, but you can't just give out licenses to people, who haven't got a business plan, who haven't got no financial backing and got no way to process crab. So, there must be somewhere in Newfoundland and Labrador you can find another couple of licenses. Maybe the new co-op was there, maybe they could issue them a license. I don't know. That's fish harvesters involved on that co-op. It's not just anybody. It's fish harvesters. Anything to make this a bit better, But I'm not saying, just throw out licenses for the sake of throwing them out. That don't cut it. And, like I said, now, I'll go back now, Paddy, and I'll say this. Last year, it was a different year. And it may be as good as it went off as what it did. But, you get to realize, too, it was early September before the plants finished processing last year. And it was around the last of August before the last crab was sold. So, if government is looking at it from a long haul, are we putting the best product on the market? Are we doing something that's going to drive down the price for the next year by doing this stuff? I think government has to come to terms and deal with these issues. And like the FFAW, they're not going to be on side with anything because, the first thing they got to do is protect the fish plant workers' jobs.
Just before we go any further, Peter, what would government's role be in putting the best product possible on the market? Like, how does the government influence the product?
Just say that again, Paddy.
So you say, government has to ensure that the best product is put on the market, but what's government's role in product quality? What do you mean by that?
Well, what I really meant was if you deal with this issue, because Newfoundland processors have been putting good products on the market, but it's hard to put good products on the market if it's 80, 90 degrees heat Fahrenheit and, you're bringing in crab in August month. That's hard to put a good product. So if they deal with this issue, crab season will open in a timely fashion and will end in July, early July, mid-July, the same as it always did. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, so basically your summary statement there is if government fixes what's already broken, that will ensure that we go a long way to not having those tie-ups and consequently get into warmer water, which diminishes the quality of the product, right?
That's right, yes. Okay. And I'm not saying like the processors, they have in the past put a very good product, a really good product into the market. And Newfoundland has been known for putting good crab on the market, but we can't continue to put a product that's critical weak all the time into the market.
Yeah, now if you look at the crab that comes from our waters versus even our neighbours in Nova Scotia, we do have a built-in barnacle problem, which is nothing we can do about it. That's not a harvester problem or a processor's problem. It's just a species issue. And it does jeopardise the product somewhat. And I don't think there's anything one government or the union or the ASP can do about that. But you're right. I mean, it's in everybody's best interest that the product is as best possible on the market because we talk about the reputation of the province and the quality of the product that's put out there. So I don't think anyone can disagree with that. And if that requires government streamlining or fixing a process, then fair enough.
Yeah, well, get the crab open in a timely fashion, because right now I don't know if this is going to be another 2023 season, and nobody wants that. Like I said, processors don't want it, harvesters don't want it, and government shouldn't want it. And when it comes to shipping out crab, You know, like, I feel, Paddy, and nobody told me this, but I feel there will be crab go off this island in tractor trailers this year. And if it don't go off, the ferry won't sail. That's my belief on that. And it's only so long, you know, you can poke the bear before the bear is going to retaliate. And nobody wants this all over again. And the last time the bear was poked was raw material sharing back, I don't know how many years ago right now, but, you know, like, nobody wants to go to that. Harvesters didn't know what they were doing from day to day. You know, like, everything gets pretty tense. So what I'm speaking, like, just, I'm not in on the hill this morning. I am in Southern Harbour. So you might say, you know, like, well, why should I say anything? Well, anyway, I'm speaking from experience. And I've been involved in a lot of those demonstrations. I'm going to tell you that they can get pretty heaped up, and nobody wants that. And I'm sure well, he may want it now, but he won't want it when it starts, if it starts, because he got everything in his hands right now to deal with it. And, you know, we got to get it past this. Gee whiz, man, it's nerve-wracking for everybody involved. And you know, like, and they got all. And when I says to Mr. Wakeham, you know, a 20-second news clip is not going to ask the question. It's not going to solve the problem. When you ask the question, you know, like, maybe you should have some solution to the problem, and put that out there, because you got to remember, PC Danny Williams' government. Well, this is where really they started changing the fishery. So when I was into another government, so I mean, they should be trying to be better than the PC government, and the PC government should be after learning, like, you know, some of the ways to make changes. And that's basically what I've got to say on that, Paddy. I'm sorry for taking up so much time. I'm not sorry for my rant, because I believe I'm as close to the truth as possible.
Yeah, fair enough. And, you know, there's got to be an acceptance on both sides of the price setting as well, because people want as much as they can possibly get. You know, if you're a harvester, processors want to pay as little as possible because of the obvious, you know, additional revenue, additional profit. So both sides have to accept what the market can actually handle. You know, I know it's a shot in the guts to go from $7.60 a pound to $2.20 a pound, but to pretend that just by saying, well, okay, let's make it $4, what's going to be the end result? Then we're going to have tens of thousands or millions of pounds of crab sitting in cold storage that no one can sell because no one can afford it.
Paddy, do you want my opinion on that?
Very quickly.
Okay. When you was in to negotiate a price, like the formula for the share, we're not talking about that now. We're just talking about the price of crab on the market. You can't go in and sit down and negotiate and pick a number out of the air. You know, you got to go in and bargain in good faith on what the market can pay.
That's it.
And that's as simple as that. You know, like, you just can't go in $5, leave it in the water. That don't make no sense, and that's not negotiating. You know, you've got to go in and you got to know how to negotiate, and that's what's going to get this fishery off and the price thing. Now, the farmer, well, that's a job for somebody else other than me.
Yes, and I'm glad it's not my job. Peter, you've had the last word. Appreciate the time.
All the best. Take care. Have a good day. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, there you go. Good show today. Big thanks to all hands who support the program. And we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.